Now, wind farms are potentially killing tens of thousands of bats a year, even though risk assessments were carried out to prevent deaths, certainly on that scale. A survey of 29 wind farms showed that 194 bats a month were killed. Extrapolate that across the country, it could mean that across the whole of Britain's onshore wind farms, around 80,000 bats are killed each year by our wind turbines. Well, joining us now, Lia Murray, the Director of Strategy at 1010, that's a climate change awareness charity, and Lia Gilmour, who's a researcher in bat ecology at the University of Bristol. Welcome both. Lia, if I can start with you, you're at Bristol University. I think this research comes from Exeter. And what they did, obviously we knew that there was a danger posed by wind turbines to bats, but not on this scale. And I think the academics have used sniffer dogs, haven't they, at Exeter, to try and actually find the corpses of these bats, particularly the pipistrelle.
Yes, yeah. So we've known for quite a while that turbines pose a significant threat to a lot of wildlife, including bats. But this is the first sort of study that's shown that the scale of this effect in the UK. So there's been some studies in the States and also mainland Europe, but this is the first time that we've actually seen what's happening here in the UK. So it's interesting to see the numbers, and so it's not all turbines necessarily, but definitely a lot of the turbines that they looked at in this Exeter study, yes. Yeah,
I mean, Lia, the obvious question, I suppose, is, we think of bats, we think of the sonar they use to navigate so swiftly and so deftly. A suggestion it doesn't work at high altitude, and that's why they're hitting the blades.
No, not necessarily. The reason that bats are being killed at wind turbines is largely suggested to be due to them being attracted to the turbines, actually to feed on insects that may be swarming around there or caught in the vortices of the blade. So it's not actually known exactly, no one's tested it, but it's suggested that it's more to do with the fact that they're attracted rather than their echolocation failing or chance collisions.
Leo, what do you make of this number, up to 80,000 bats a year being killed by wind turbines?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say about that is that I spoke with the lead author of the Exeter study yesterday, and he was quick to distance himself from that 80,000 deaths figure. He told me that his team could not work out how the Telegraph had calculated 80,000 deaths. One of the key findings of the study is that bat deaths are extremely variable at different wind farm sites. So how the Telegraph calculated 80,000...
We'd like to know, wouldn't we? We'd like to know.
I'm not a bat scientist, unlike Lia. But look, I think the key thing to take away from this study is that we need to do more to protect bats. This is not a reason to stop
It might be a bit late now, Lia.
We've
built the wind farms, haven't we?
Yes, so I think...
Come in.
Yeah, go on,
Lia. Lia works on solutions, so...
Yeah, so the difficulty with this is that the current mitigation measures that are put in place at the moment to protect bats are just not up to scratch. They're not working. So other mitigation measures need to be put in place, and we do need to do more to protect bats, but also at wind turbines that are already in place, so post construction. So I think there needs to be a shake-up of the environmental impact assessments, which is suggested in the Exeter study, but also post-construction mitigation measures need to be put in place as well for those already in place.
Post-construction mitigation measures, turning them off in the summer. Is that what you mean in plain English?
Not necessarily. So you can look at predicting fatalities using weather conditions, and that's been done in mainland Europe. And then you can turn off or limit the operation of the turbines at different times. There's also options for other mitigation measures such as deterrents, which could be used at turbines, and they would keep the bats away from the turbine blades. So things like acoustic deterrents, speakers that give out a sort of white noise sound. So
Are we sure they'd work, Leo? Are we sure they'd work?
Well, that's what my research is on, so I'm looking at that at the moment. And sort of some preliminary studies are saying that I've done, which I can't sort of comment too much on, but are saying that we can show that maybe these acoustic deterrents may have some effect at keeping the bats away. But nothing's been done at turbines just yet in the UK.
Leo, just going back to what the Telegraph wrote up, I mean, clearly it's often the case that shrewd journalists use those conditional words like could and up to frame an argument in a certain way. But I think it's a reasonable assumption, isn't it, that thousands of bats, maybe you're going to disagree with me, that thousands of bats are being killed by wind turbines every year. Is that a price worth paying for renewable energy?
Well, I think it's important to get some perspective here because, for a start, climate change represents a much bigger threat to bats ultimately than wind turbines do. Right? If we fail to reduce emissions fast enough to prevent the worst case scenarios under climate change from happening, many bat species will be driven to extinction. Now, nobody is saying that wind turbines are going to make any bat species go extinct. So I think that's the first thing to say. Secondly, there have been other studies which compare the rates of death for birds and bats from different energy generation technologies. And, a 2009 study showed that fossil plant generation ultimately results in the deaths of roughly 15 times as many bats and birds as wind turbines do. There's just a relentless focus on the direct impacts of wind. Ultimately, all energy sources, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? All energy sources have some environmental impacts. And the environmental impacts of wind turbines are very, very small compared with the technologies that they are replacing. So, ultimately, we have a net gain from switching to wind generation from things like burning coal.
The thing is, Leo, I mean, for instance, I can recall within the last couple of years, we did a story about the protection afforded to our bat population, particularly in relation, for instance, to the churches, belfries where they were roosting, and they couldn't be moved on because of these regulations, such that they were, for instance, their droppings were falling on the heads of parishioners during weddings. Such was the degree of protection under law that they enjoyed. And some people see a gap between that kind of protection and what's happening at the wind turbines. You seem to suggest
Well, that would be a misleading perception because, I think as Lia pointed out, and as the study, one of the key findings of the study is that enormous sums of money are spent in pre-construction environmental impact assessments. What the study has found is that those don't necessarily work very well. They don't work very well to predict the number of bat deaths. So we need a different mitigation measure. It's not as if the protections aren't there. They're there, they're just not working. So, this is why the work of people like Lia at Bristol on ultrasound transmitters, but the potential of different mitigation measures is so important. As I say, bats ultimately benefit from us switching to renewable generation sources.
Yeah. Leo, do you buy that argument that, Leo is suggesting that it's, bats need to think long term about this?
Yes, I completely agree. I think that climate change is a major threat to humans and wildlife worldwide, and we do need to start investing in renewable sources. I think it's more of a shake-up of the systems already in place and the mitigation systems, and more money needs to be put into research to be able to shake this up. So I completely agree with what Leo's saying, and I think it's a similar scenario with what's going on in the churches. Obviously, there's lots of human-wildlife conflict that arises when wildlife comes into contact with areas with expanding populations and whatnot. But I think what we do need to focus on is dealing with that conflict, and legislation and everything is in place so that we start with that. But obviously that has to be streamlined.
Yeah. Leo, you've already hinted at this a little bit, that there is obviously this raging debate, and you get people who are pretty ideologically driven when it comes to wind energy, for and against. Is it, however, important that when we talk about wind power that there's a total transparency, and you've already indicated this, that yes, sometimes there are some downsides, and we maybe haven't even thought of all of them?
To be honest, I think the reverse is true. There is just a constant focus on the downsides of wind energy. 1010 commissioned our own piece of research earlier, a few weeks ago from Imperial College, analysing media coverage of wind generation in the UK over the last few years. And 4 out of 5 stories about wind power, 4 out of 5 editorials and comment pieces are negative and focus on the risks. And you simply don't have this level of scrutiny on the damage which is being caused.
Fracking, for instance?
Well, yes, so even articles on fracking tended to be more positive than articles on onshore wind generation,
Well,
which is really extraordinary because, the government's own statistics show that onshore wind generation is much, much more popular with the UK public than the technologies they back, like fracking and nuclear. So, there is a huge mismatch between how wind energy is presented and the British people's feelings about it, actually. The level of opposition to wind power in the UK remains very small. It's just that the people who really dislike it are disproportionately influential. And I think I would add,
They sometimes say to me the people who've got to look at them a lot, Leo.
Yes, so one of the things we campaign for at 1010 is community energy, Colin.
Right,
community energy is the solution to that problem.
Leo
Thank you.
and Lia, thanks both very much indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.